Well, everybody, welcome to the Estes Valley Watershed Coalition's Butterfly Gardening Talk. I'm Celeste Fraser, and I'm on the board of the Watershed Coalition. Let me give you a little bit of background. After the 2013 flood, we formed in order to restore the watershed. It was a mess with all kinds of erosion. Teddy, that's my dog. With erosion and logs in the stream, and it was a mess. Anyway, today we still have grants coming in on maintaining healthy rivers. So that means planting willows, weeding invasives, and we have grants that help us keep forests healthy for fire prevention in particular. And in 2019, we formed the Wandering Wildlife Society to support protection of wildlife and their habitat. And that includes education outreach, such as keeping wildlife safe and visitors safe during ruts and the elk ruts and calving season. And we now provide monthly wildlife talks. And our next month in June is June 17th. Scott Rashid will talk about hummingbirds and bluebirds. And if you haven't heard him, he is really spectacular. Now today, we're excited to have Calais Thomas from the Butterfly Pavilion in Westminster. And she's going to provide tips on how to plant a butterfly garden to attract and maintain healthy habitat for these beautiful creatures. And this presentation will be taped for those who were unable to attend. So Calais, welcome again, and take it away.
Awesome, thank you. It's so good to be here with all of you today. We're definitely going to get to talk about some butterfly gardening tips and get some good ideas for how we can build up some nice, beautiful gardens and also increase some diversity of butterflies and maybe a few other good insects in our areas. So we'll have a good time with that today. Some of you may have visited Butterfly Pavilion before. I am just going to go ahead and give a quick introduction. We are an invertebrate zoo in Westminster, Colorado. And so what that means basically, invertebrates are animals that don't have spines or backbones. And we definitely like to show them off. So we have not just butterflies, but spiders and sea stars and octopus, lobsters, all kinds of different animals that all have that really key thing important or in common. And we like to show them off for a few reasons. And one that I think surprises a lot of people is kind of the fact that they are most of the animal species on this planet. So if we are thinking about all the animals in the world, invertebrates make up 97% of all animal species. So animals like those ladybugs and jellyfish and spiders and worms, all of those make up way more animals than the animals with bones, like humans, birds, reptiles, fish, mammals. All of those are only about 3% of the world's animals. So we definitely have a lot that we can talk about and show off with them. And we are going to be thinking about how we can increase some of their diversity, how we can make great habitats for some of them. If we are thinking about these different animals, a lot of what we think about are going to be mammals and birds, right? But insects are, I think we have about 800,000 species actually described, and we estimate that there's a lot more than that. We sometimes have estimates up to about 2 million species, just a lot of them haven't been discovered yet. So definitely a lot that we could think about today, and we will focus on those butterflies. But it is important to think about when you're creating a good habitat for butterflies, you're going to end up increasing a lot of the other insect populations as well. Hopefully some more of the good ones and not some of the pests that might be destroying our gardens, but we'll think about some solutions to that as well. And I do want to invite you, we are going to have probably some time to answer questions, especially at the end of our program today. So if you think of something throughout the program and put it in the chat, that's great. You also may have a little bit more experience than me or know more about what plants and butterflies you see in your area more than I will. So if you have something to chime in with a little like, oh yeah, I've seen those butterflies around here, or oh, that plant doesn't really work in this area, definitely share some of those things. A lot of what I'm sharing is kind of some general tips for a lot of areas in Colorado. I've tried to look into a few things in Estes and Boulder and those surrounding areas, but there may be some things that I've just missed. So please feel free to share anything that you have to contribute to this conversation today as well. So we are going to be thinking about butterfly gardening, and to do that, we have to think about all of the stages of a butterfly. We don't often think about a caterpillar being the same thing as a butterfly, but it is. It's just a baby butterfly. So if we are building a habitat or a garden, we're going to be thinking about butterflies in all of these various stages. So we're going to be looking for them as eggs. We're going to be looking for them in the larva or the caterpillar stages. We'll also be then looking at them in the pupa or chrysalis stages, and of course in their beautiful final stage as an adult. So we will think about how we can provide for all stages of a butterfly's life, not just the adult butterflies, even though those will be the beautiful centerpieces to our gardens often. And butterfly gardening, just a quick kind of definition that we have gathered over our years. We are thinking about this as the intentional planting and arrangement of specialized floral gardens with diverse nectar-producing and larval food plants to attract colorful butterflies. So there are a few of those key points I just covered too, where we're thinking about nectar and some of the things the adult butterflies will be looking for, but we're also building up these habitats for the different stages. So we'll think about larval food plants and all kinds to really create that diversity that we're looking for. And we are going to go over about 5 steps of different things to think about as you are planning a butterfly garden or just hoping to improve your area even a little bit, even if you're not going for a full butterfly garden. But we are going to be thinking about native butterflies and their needs. Location is going to be very important to how we design a butterfly garden. The design overall, what types of plants, where you want to put them, if there's things besides plants that we're trying to put in these gardens, we'll be thinking about that. We'll definitely go over quite a selection of plants that are really good for some of our hardiness zones and really good nectar plants and host plants for these butterflies. And then just a few tips about maintenance and what you can do to make sure your butterfly garden is flourishing for years to come. So we are going to start with our native butterflies and think about what they specifically might need. This is going to come in a couple of parts. We will be talking about their host plants. So for those of you who may not know, butterfly caterpillars are really, really picky eaters. So if they aren't on the right types of plants, they just won't eat. So when a female butterfly is looking for a place to lay her eggs, she is looking for specific plants to make sure that her caterpillars will eat and really flourish. So we're going to be thinking about the specific host plants for these native butterflies. And then we're going to go for a few descriptions as well, both the butterfly itself, the adult, the caterpillar, and often some eggs. So if you are looking in your garden, you know a few of those stages to look for as you're checking that you might have some visitors. So we'll start with probably one of the bigger butterflies we see around Colorado. This is the two-tailed swallowtail. Beautiful black and yellow butterfly. They tend to be below about 8,000 feet elevation, so you might be kind of right on the border of being able to see them, but they do can go up a little bit. And they are going to have those different host plants listed there: ash, wild cherry, and serviceberry. So those are definitely ones that they will be looking for in order to lay their eggs. And then they are going to have a few different looks as a caterpillar. We call different stages of a caterpillar different instars. So even in the same caterpillar, they might look different as a very young, freshly hatched caterpillar versus an older caterpillar that's about to go into the chrysalis stage. So the picture here has that 4th instar, which actually does a really good job of imitating bird poop. And then it goes into, it sheds its skin and starts looking more like the 5th instar. So there is a lot of variation in how these two-tailed swallowtail caterpillars look. And then we'll also kind of think about some of the ways these butterflies survive. So I'm going to consider it the way they overwinter, because that'll be very important for the kind of shelters and things we want to provide for the butterflies in these gardens. So for this particular butterfly, they are going to overwinter in the pupa stage. So that means when they go into their chrysalis, pictured there is that kind of bark textured chrysalis, it is going to basically be how they survive the winter. So they'll enter that in the kind of fall, and then once it becomes spring, they'll start emerging as those freshly hatched adult butterflies. And just a quick description of those caterpillars. We do have those, the one does look exactly like bird poop. It's doing a great job of that. And then there is the older caterpillars that are going to be a smooth green color with some yellow eye spots. So you can definitely tell them apart in all stages, but especially when they're caterpillars and adults. Another common butterfly that you'll find in our areas, cabbage white butterflies are excellent. Their host plant, as their name suggests, will be different kinds of vegetables, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower. If you have vegetable gardens, you'll attract a few of these guys. I think that's probably why this is one of the only butterflies that the USDA has listed as a pest species. So they are going to be munching on some of those vegetable crops and things like that, which does probably give them a little bit of a bad reputation. But they are a simple, very small white butterfly. And then as eggs and caterpillars, they are going to look a little bit different from our other caterpillars. The eggs are really elongated and yellow, whereas the caterpillars are going to be very yellow and almost translucent with some black spotting along their body and black heads as well. So we'll be able to tell them apart that way. And I believe these also overwinter in the pupa stage. Yep. So they'll be definitely ones that will need some sort of structure to pupate onto and attach themselves as well. And then we have this one, which is honestly a pretty famous butterfly, painted ladies. They're very popular with school groups and little kids because they're easy to raise. So some of you may have even contributed to an experiment like this yourselves, where you helped raise caterpillars and they came out as these painted ladies. Their host plants are going to be more thistles, other composites, mallows. And we're also going to be thinking about them. Their eggs are really interesting looking. They've got this mint green color to them and some ridges. And as a caterpillar, they're going to be very yellow, kind of spotted with black. And they'll have a lot of rows of spines. So they've got those yellow spines. And in different instars, their head will be sometimes red. So there's a little difference in how they look as they grow as caterpillars. They will actually overwinter in both the pupa stage and the adult stage. They are a little bit known because they do migrate a little bit. There's not as much known about their migrations as like monarch migrations. And they have a lot of their migrations that is understood has to do with where they are in Europe. So they are found worldwide, but there are some scientists who argue that their migration in Europe is longer than the monarch migration here. So it's a little contested as to who migrates the furthest. But because of that, they're able to spend the winter in warmer areas as adults. So sometimes that's why you'll see them actually staying as adults through the winter. And then, of course, you can't talk about the painted lady without also talking about the monarch. You can kind of see they do look very similar. The painted lady is orange and black. It's got some more white to it, but there is a pretty striking difference in their patterns. Monarchs are going to be more striped, more veiny. So you'll have the orange with black veins going through. And their host plant is going to be a lot of different species of milkweed. So there are a few varieties. We grow a lot of showy milkweed here, and we'll be talking a little bit more about those plants a bit later. And they are famous, of course, for their migration. So they will be migrating. They start their migration in Michoacan, Mexico in the springtime. And then across 3 generations of butterflies, they will be moving north through the United States. They'll even reach some parts of southern Canada. And by the time they've reached the north, they will lay eggs for the last time, produce 1 more generation, and in about September or October, that generation starts migrating all the way back south. So they are pretty mysterious, considering it takes 3 generations to make the journey north and only 1 to make the journey south. And scientists aren't really sure why these butterflies live longer, that last generation lives longer, and how they're able to fly further than the other generations. So there are still some things we're researching about them. But it does mean that we'll occasionally kind of see them here in Colorado. We found that, especially in recent years, a lot of the migration has been moving further and further east. So I think like last year or the year before, we only saw a handful of monarchs on our property. And I talked it over with some of my fellow educators, and I don't know that they expect any monarchs to be closer to like Estes and Boulder and those areas, but it's entirely possible there are some that wander over that way. They're just getting a little rarer and rarer along the west. And then, yeah, I kind of briefly skimmed over it. Their caterpillars are going to have a very distinct white, black, and yellow striping to them. They'll look a little bit, it won't be quite as distinct as the earlier instars, but especially as they get to be into those 4th or 5th instars, as they shed their skin and get ready to go into the pupa, they will be looking a little bit more distinct and striped. One of the other native species we're going to see here in Colorado is the eastern black swallowtail. So a beautiful black butterfly with some yellow spotting, striping on it. And these are going to be focusing their host plants on the, I never pronounce this right probably, but Acacia family. So these would be plants like dill, parsley, fennel, carrots, Queen Anne's lace. So if you have some of those in your garden, you'll definitely get some of these eggs. And they're very simple, smooth white eggs, but then they do have some green and black striping with some yellow spots on them as caterpillars. So, and if you can kind of see, swallowtails are sometimes really interesting as caterpillars. They have these structures in the front of their head. In this picture, they're like very yellow, firm structures, but they can produce a really awful smell from those. So that's one of the ways they protect themselves. If something pokes them or is trying to eat them, they'll unfurl these really long antennas that just smell awful, and usually they get left alone. So I think the earlier swallowtail we talked about does something like that a little bit too. Kind of similar to the cabbage white, there's going to be a slightly different butterfly known as the common or clouded sulfur. So these are going to be a little bit more off-white with a little black and yellow spotting on them. And they're going to have host plants that are going to be more like legumes or clover or alfalfa. So you'll see them on there, very small butterfly, just like the cabbage whites. And they have some kind of different looking eggs. Usually they're kind of whitish or yellow or off-white with some spotting on them. And then the caterpillar is very distinct and like a lime green with a yellow stripe running down its side and some of that kind of beautiful blue spotting to it as well. And these ones also overwinter in the pupa stage. So a lot of these will be the same. The only ones I think that are going to overwinter as adults will be some of those that migrate. So the monarchs and the painted ladies, things like that. Just a couple more left for our native Colorado species. We've got a mourning cloak. Their host plants are cottonwood, poplar, aspen, elm, lots of different types of trees. They're going to be kind of a more dark black color with a little bit of blue spotting and yellow edges. And then they are going to have almost clear kind of off-white eggs and very distinct caterpillars that'll be black with these just branching spikes all over their bodies to give them a kind of intimidating look. And then we'll have some others that are more probably also mistaken for those monarchs a bit and painted ladies, the variegated fritillary. Their host plants are going to be more stonecrop, violets, and pansies, a few of these things that we might be planting in our gardens. We'll see some of these plants a little later. Their caterpillars are very, very distinct. They've got that bright orange color to them and a lot of that black spikes all down his body and lines as well, with some white spotting. So definitely a distinct one if you see it in your garden. And then one of my personal favorites, the Silvery Blue, is a very gorgeous bluish color, as its name suggests. Their host plants are also going to be some of those legumes, an alfalfa, wild pea, and they're going to look pretty kind of camouflaged as a caterpillar. They're very just a normal kind of green, so they're not really going to stand out like some of these other ones. But they will be a little bit furry looking as well. So you can kind of tell them apart that way with those short little white hairs. So that's a lot of different butterflies you might see. There's definitely a few more. I think Colorado is 5th in the United States in Lepidopteran diversity. So we have the 5th most types of butterflies and moths. So that is really just a kind of sample of the ones that we would see in our areas. Definitely there's others that are going to be around, like the sphinx moths, hummingbird moths you might see around. There's I'm blanking on the name of our state insect right now. The Colorado hair streak, there we go. That's a nice alpine butterfly that you might see around, but there are going to be definitely a lot more that we can see than that. But we will go ahead and move on to kind of that second step, the idea of location and understanding exactly where we are putting this, what things we're going to be looking for. And you definitely want a location that's really open, lots of space, of course, for butterflies to be flying around and flying in. You're going to want it to be in a sunny space. Butterflies definitely rely on finding sunny spots to warm up their wings. They are cold-blooded, so they're going to need some help making sure their bodies are as warm as possible. And then you're also going to want to think about protection from the wind. These are fragile insects we're talking about. A windstorm could be potentially really dangerous for them, and definitely not an area that would be very good for them to be flying around in. So there are going to be some ideas we'll think about, certain plants that we will try to incorporate that will give us some of that protection that they require. And once we kind of have our location in this good spot, we have to think about our design. And this is going to be based on a lot of those things that butterflies are going to need. So it's definitely going to be a focus on food and places to shelter. But a lot of what we're going to go over has, you'll hear me repeat it a lot, but we're going to be thinking about variety, right? So you want a lot of different flowers, especially if you want a lot of different butterflies. You're going to need to think about different colors, different times of years that these flowers are blooming, right? You don't want just ones that are going to bloom in summer. You want some that'll be starting in spring, transitioning to summer, transitioning to the fall. So you're going to be thinking about a really wide variety of flowers as well. So we are going to see quite a few of those examples. And then a lot of the good tips for some of the food, let's see. We definitely have to have a variety of those host plants and nectar plants for the adults. And I like to remind people too, you know, if you are intentionally planting a butterfly garden with host plants, that means you are intentionally planting plants that will get eaten, right? So we don't want to shy away from some of our plants having little bite marks in them, right? We are planting them with this support in mind. So definitely we want to keep an eye on some of the more pest varieties of insects, but there are some insects we're trying to support, and that does mean allowing them to munch on some of these leaves and things like that. So we will think a lot about those. And then we are looking for good nectar plants. So butterflies are definitely going to rely on that sugary water that can be found in a lot of plants. Even if we have some supplements of sugar water dishes or things put out for them, we definitely want them to be able to get them naturally from the plants as well. So we'll think about good types of flowers that provide a really good landing spot for them and are really in line with how they get nectar from plants as well. So you will definitely want to plant lots of the same type of flowers together. Sometimes people have the urge to like really diversify the plants around, right? And the best way to attract butterflies, it's kind of hard for them to see just one flower or one plant by itself. So the best thing to do is plant a few together. So you're wanting to cluster the same variety together so it really stands out to them and they're able to find a lot of different ones. Again, variety is going to be my word of the day, right? I'm going to say it over and over again. You want a lot of plants with different heights as well. So you're going to want taller plants, especially for some of those windbreaks. And then you're going to want some plants to fill in along the bottom, closer to the rocks and in different outcroppings. So definitely thinking about that variety of heights as well is very important today. And of course, those are the different ideas for food, but we are thinking about shelter as well. If we want to have a place for some of these butterflies to even overwinter as the pupa stage, they're going to need plants that have a good structure even through the winter. So good tall grasses and shrubs, trees if we can manage them. There are going to be a few trees that are host plants too, so it's an excellent addition on that end as well. But then definitely some of those windbreaks, so protecting this garden from those higher winds that could affect these butterflies as well. And I mentioned it a little bit, but you're going to need other parts to this garden as well. Definitely some sunning areas. So if they have good trees or places that they can rest on, that'll be nice sunny spots, or this can be provided by some rocks. So if there's heat that is coming off of these rocks from being in the sun, that can help warm them up as well. But you're going to have to think of a couple, at least really good sunny spots as well. And then we don't often think about how butterflies get water, but they definitely will need water sources as well. A lot of times what they will do is actually get their water from the ground. So they're not going to risk going to really large lakes or ponds, right? Because that can be potentially dangerous for these small little butterflies. But they will be thinking about how to get water from the ground. If there's a moist area, they will land there and collect water. And in these kind of rocky areas or sandy areas, they'll collect a lot of nutrients and minerals as well. So definitely we want some area. This can be a little bit, you can almost create a little puddling area that's moist just by putting in a like waterproof container filled with rocks and a little dirt or something that's kept more moist than some of the other areas are. So if you don't naturally get some of these good puddling areas, you can definitely manufacture them. And I do think, I don't mind answering questions as we go through. So thank you, Dawn, for putting in a question there. Will caterpillars or butterflies eat insects? I think I looked this up one time. There are a couple of varieties in the world of caterpillars that will eat other insects. I don't know if any of them are native to this area, but definitely like the vast majority of caterpillars are going to be eating their particular host plants or leaves. They're going to be mostly herbivores. So I think there's just a handful that are carnivorous. And then butterflies themselves as adults will only drink nectar, and that's part of the plant selection part I was actually going to get into. They, as butterflies, have a mouth that is very specialized to drinking nectar. So you can kind of see it in this picture. Right underneath that butterfly's antenna, there's that big loop, and that is their proboscis. It's basically like a long tongue modified into a straw. So they will only be able to drink liquids, which for the most part is going to be nectar and sugar juices. If there are like rotting fruits or things like that that have acquired a lot of fermented juices, they might drink some of those. Some butterflies will also intentionally make other animals cry to drink their tears. It's actually a really funny thing that's been studied in some butterflies with animals like alligators or turtles. They will flutter at their eyes and make their eyes water so that way they can actually drink up some of the tears or the fluid from their eyes. So there's all kinds of really weird things in the butterfly world like that too. So they'll drink that. There's also been butterflies recorded drinking urine or things like that. So they will find a lot of different things, but they won't really eat anything. They're definitely going to just be drinking things. And especially for our beautiful gardens, we don't need to provide any turtles or things for them to get the tears from. We can definitely focus on the nectar. That'll be the most important thing for them anyways. It gives them energy to fly around and find mates and lay eggs and all that important stuff. So good question though. Yeah, so as we are thinking about plants, we are thinking about good ones for getting that nectar, right? If they have a really long proboscis, then we want to think about flowers that are going to be more tubular, something that they have to stick a proboscis down into to get nectar. So they will tend to prefer some of those. We'll see a lot of examples of those. We also have to think about color a little bit. We can only see a certain spectrum of light, right? And for butterflies, they are also able to see ultraviolet. So to them, flowers will look a little bit different than they will to us. When you are able to look at flowers under ultraviolet light, sometimes they have these lines on them or these targets that really direct butterflies to the nectar. If we think about plants, a lot of them are relying on animals like butterflies and bees to help pollinate them. So they want butterflies and bees to find the nectar, which is the plant's reward for also gathering the pollen and transferring it to another plant. So there are definitely some ideas there about which types of plants we want to look for, or which color flowers. Butterflies are mostly going to be attracted to purple, white, yellow, pink, and blue, but they will also visit orange and red. So it's not as important to consider color, but definitely some of those cooler colors on the spectrum will be a little bit more successful. And on top of the color and things like that, we are thinking about shape, right? I already kind of pointed out those tubed flowers are going to be a little bit better, but we also want flowers that are going to be in clusters. So if they can be in one place and get nectar from a lot of little flowers, that's going to be ideal for them. And then because they are really long-legged and can be a little heavier bodied, they're going to need a wide kind of area to rest on. So there are going to be some wide flowers that will work really well for that, or if they're clustered like the red flowers in this picture, that provides a lot of different flowers for them to rest on and provide that wide area that they need. So we are going to go into some idea about which plants will be really best for this. I'll try not to spend too much time just listing off plants, but there are going to be a few. One of the important things to consider for this, there may be some of these plants that just won't be as good for where you live. I kind of looked it up. From what I could tell, like a lot of areas in Estes and Boulder are in hardiness zone 4A, 4B, 5A, 5B, so that might be kind of familiar to some of you. So a lot of these will fit into that, but some of these will require different levels of water and some of those other factors that are going to vary based on location. So, what time of year things tend to freeze, how deep your soil is, how good your soil is, things like that. So we will definitely consider a lot of different plants, but recognize there might be some that fit better for your area than others. And then someone did ask, do we know the extent of the impact of destruction of the monarch sanctuary preservation that occurred at the US-Mexico border before we get into this? And I actually don't know too much about that. A lot of the monarch sanctuaries we visit are a little bit more central South America, Mexico. So they were probably not quite as affected, but definitely there could have been some migrating that were affected. Anytime there is habitat loss or things that are constructed in areas that monarchs typically pass over, there will be some impact on their populations for sure. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, their population actually went up for the first time, either last year or the year before. So there have been some improvements made, but definitely they are taking up less space in Mexico in their like winter location than they used to. So definitely something to think. But yeah, well, I wanted to answer that real quick before we got into our plants. So we are going to think about perennials first. These are going to be ones that will come back every year. Some on this list may have changed as like temperatures just naturally fluctuate in different areas across different years. Some plants become perennials and some become annuals. So hopefully this list is still pretty accurate, but keep in mind that there might be some that you will have to replant, and there might be some annuals listed a little later that are turning into perennials. So, but there are a lot of beautiful flowers. You're gonna see a lot like lilac. These are really good. They've got those clusters of flowers. They will have really tubular flowers, so they're good for nectar. And you'll see all of these will be listed with kind of their height, and then what time of year they're blooming, the spring for the lilac, and the hardiness zone they will be pretty good at surviving in. So we definitely think about all these variety, right? All the different varieties of height, the time of year they're blooming, and then of course you want to find ones that fit in the hardiness zone you live at. So lilac is a pretty good one, especially their colors and the shape of their flowers will be pretty good. And then there will be some on this list that are host plants. Milkweed is definitely a nice summer blooming flower that is a good host plant, as well as a good nectar plant. So we'll find them in lots of gardens like this. They're a little bit smaller than lilac, so they'll be good variety for when paired with it. Black-eyed Susan is a really good one. These bloom midsummer to early fall, so they're good later of the year one. We've got some yarrow. So yarrow comes in a lot of different colors, so it's really good to add that diversity. You can do a few different varieties of yarrow and get some great different colors in there. And then they do have those really flat tops where butterflies can rest on, and very tubular flowers. So good one for late summer to fall. Butterfly bush, it's right in the name. They're great for butterflies. They've got those perfect flowers. These will also bloom late summer to early fall, so you've got a little variety there. They're a taller variety of plant, so they will make a good upper limit of what you need. Hyssop is a good one. They're a little bit medium, more shorter plant. They'll bloom summer to fall, so you got a good end of year one there. And then they've got those tubes. So especially some of the butterflies that have longer proboscis will kind of flock to this one. Like I said, variety is the key. There's going to be bigger butterflies that will have longer proboscis, and smaller butterflies that will have shorter ones. So if you have some smaller tube flowers, some larger, you're going to get a lot of variety of butterflies. Asters are really great. There's actually about 180 species of asters in North America, so you might find a couple of varieties that will work for you. They do bloom late summer to fall, so they're a great later one, kind of medium to short height. Purple cone flowers are another great perennial. Some of you might recognize their species name, Echinacea. They are often used to make echinacea tea, which is really good for the immune system. So a little benefit to those as well. These will be midsummer to fall. Goldenrod is an amazing Colorado native species of plant. So you can find them a lot along meadows and pastures and along roads. They do bloom about late summer to early fall. This is one I'd actually never heard of, Joe Pye weed. So it's I guess a great plant that's an herb, a good wildflower, but they do really well in moist locations. So they might not be the best for some areas of Colorado, but definitely they will bloom late summer to the early frost. We've got some rabbit brush. I can't speak today, apparently. They are also a native Colorado species, but this one is going to be really good for the dry area. So a little bit in contrast to that last one. They do bloom in fall, and they're kind of a nice one to have year round just because they maintain some of their structure. So they might be kind of good for some of those like windbreak areas as a nice little shrub. We got a blanket flower. You've seen a lot of these kind of flatter flowers that have good landing pads for some of our butterflies. These ones bloom summer to fall, and they're really drought tolerant. So definitely another great one for Colorado. We've got tick seed. This is a nice plant it's kind of easy to place. They just need a sunny spot with some average soil. And they are really heavy bloomers. They'll produce a lot of flowers, and they really cut easily as well. So if you wanted a couple to spruce up your home, that's a good one too. These ones are a little earlier, so they will start blooming late spring, but they will stay blooming all the way to the fall as well. So a great addition to your gardens. There's the blazing star gay feather. Again, you see all those different flowers. We want those clusters of flowers. This is a great one for midsummer to start blooming. Bee balms, another pretty useful one. You get all those little tubular flowers, and then they have a really fragrant smell to them too. And we talked a little bit earlier, Celeste and I did, about those deer that you might find in your gardens. And I kind of looked it up because I don't really know, but I found that like a lot of fragrant plants tend to keep deer away, so maybe bee balm is a good one to help with that. We'll see. Maybe you can test it out and let me know. But definitely something to think about there as well. We've got Viburnum. They're very white flowers, kind of different. Also another fragrant one. And they do provide some beautiful fall foliage as well. Sneezeweed is another one. I guess it has a funny name. I was looking this up. It says that its name is based on the former use of its dried leaves, which were inhaled to cause sneezing that would supposedly rid the body of evil spirits. So if you feel like you have a problem with evil spirits, this might have a dual purpose in your butterfly garden. But it does bloom about summer to fall. Stonecrop is another one. This is another host plant, so it'll be a good one for that. The butterfly, I can never say, the variegated fritillary, or something like that. You get it, the idea. But it's another good host plant, so expect it to be munched up a little bit, but it does have good water storing leaves. You can kind of see they almost look like succulents there as well. And then those are the ones that will kind of come back every year. Annuals are going to be those plants that you will have to replant. So you might put them in a convenient area. You can also change up the variety year after year. So it might be a good opportunity as well. We've got some pentas. They tend to bloom in the summer. We actually plant these in our rainforest conservatory. So that way our butterflies can have some extra nectar plants in the winter. So they are one that we're pretty familiar with. South American vervain, I think we have this one in our rainforest as well. Great little tubular plants that provide lots of nectar. They're definitely ideal for those butterflies to stick that proboscis down into. Lantana, these ones are kind of interesting. They have kind of a pollination color signal. So as the flowers age, they change color a little bit. So when they start to look more orange, it's more likely to have been pollinated. So there is a little variety in the colors you can get with those, which I find fascinating. I do have cosmos. They are those big, beautiful flowers that are great landing pads for butterflies. Maximilian sunflower, another beautiful one that's late summer to fall, and definitely a one that butterflies enjoy and have nice landing pads as well. Sweet Alyssum, this is one of my favorites. It's actually a really low blooming flower, and it's called like a creeping flower. So it fills in a lot of those gaps of our gardens really nicely. You can fill in some gaps in pathways and stone walls, and it is going to be a little bit lower to the ground. And they are pretty easy to get started, even if they're planted kind of late in the year. So it's one that's a good option for a while. French marigolds are great. These are also great for vegetable gardens because they kind of detract some of those pests that would be eating things up. So a really good one. They somehow will it's one of those magic flowers where they will attract the good bugs like butterflies and bees, but then they'll keep away some of the bad ones we don't want for our gardens. So they're pretty good ones for that. And then we have kind of to finish us off here, the zinnias as well. So there's lots of different colors for these, and they are very highly attractive to butterflies. So definitely you want to plant lots of tall red or hot pink zinnias, I guess, do best with butterflies. And we'll just kind of finish the section with this quote that I find really beautiful. You know, a garden is as static as a painting until butterflies bring it to life. So when you have all those beautiful plants, a garden is still really beautiful, but especially curating it to bring in butterflies and other insects, it really just makes a garden all that much better, in my opinion, for sure. So I think unless we want to go over some tips for more maintenance and things like that, I do want to make sure that I don't overextend my time here a little bit and have time for questions and things like that. So it kind of is up to you guys. I have a few tips about like preparing soil and things like that, but if we would rather ask a few questions, we're welcome to do that as well. So just let me know. I know that's a lot to talk about. Maybe I also kind of just wanted a little breather. I'll give it a moment. I know that.
I had a quick question, and it's just out of curiosity. Do all of the caterpillars that have the spines or the fuzzy ones, do they all sting, or are some of them just for show?
So some of them will definitely be for show. A lot of times they have something called urticating hairs, which aren't necessarily stingers. They're just very irritating hairs. So they'll feel kind of like if you got fiberglass in your skin. But then, yeah, there will be a few that do have more of a stinging sensation. So there's a little variety in the types of spines and furs that are found on the caterpillars for sure.
I just don't touch any of them.
Yeah. There might be a few that actually would be really, really soft and nice, but I would rather not risk it. We actually, some of you may know, we handle a tarantula often, and her abdomen is just covered in those urticating hairs. So if she grooms on you, your hand is just miserable for like a week. But it definitely makes me not want to touch any caterpillars that I see.
I do have one question.
Yeah, go for it.
This is Dawn. So it's all perennials that we've seen. Are there any annuals that we could actually, maybe I just have confused my annuals and perennials. Maybe you already showed them, but.
Yeah, you're good. So the second half of those flowers were all annuals. So
oh, good. Okay.
Pentas, South American vervain, lantana, cosmos.
Okay.
Sunflower. Yeah, there's a few there, the sweet alyssum, marigolds, and zinnias.
Okay.
And
right,
I
awesome.
actually, there are some resources listed at the end of this PowerPoint here that I'll copy and paste into the chat. So if anyone needs books or resources or websites to go to get a little more information.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Of course. There's my first set. And I saw someone helped contribute. They said, deer do not eat the native bee balms. So that would be a good one then if we're thinking about some larger animals we want to deter from our gardens. Yeah, so there's a first little bit of resources. I actually did not gather any of these resources, so I apologize if some of them are not available anymore or hard to find, but there might be a few good websites listed in there that can help us out both with butterfly identification and with some information about plants. There's also another great website I'll put in there, www.pollinators. Wait, let me check that it's the right one. But it's a website where you can go and type in your zip code, and it'll bring up a whole guide of plants that are really good for pollinators. So it'll bring up native plants to your area that will benefit both like bees and butterflies. So we'll get that one in there as well. Yeah, perfect. So on this website, it just has a place for you to enter your zip code, and then you can get some more information specifically tailored to your area.
Well, thank you very much. I
Of
appreciate it.
course. Of course. Thank you all for letting me join you today and bring a little bit of this information in. Oh, I did have real quick, we apparently lost our Colorado butterfly specimens, but I do have a few here that are ones that we have in our conservatory. So we have just a few I can show off. These are all going to be tropical species. So there are a few that look similar to ones we might find, like this Taos swallowtail here. But then there's the monarch as well. We sometimes get those in our conservatory. So just a little bit of the variety of ones from around the world for sure. Definitely this center one here, if I can get it, is one of my favorites. It's a northern birdwing. So it's got that green. This is a male one. The females are a little bit more darker colored, so they can blend in a little better. And then a cousin to the monarch from Southeast Asia is this paper kite here as well. So since I am never able to have live butterflies in my program, sometimes it's nice to just get to share a few of those as well. But awesome. Oh, and then I guess we'll have one last question that I got. Can you explain the difference between a butterfly and a moth to end today? There's no 100% of the time rule. You really have to check their DNA to know for sure. But there are a few things you can use to kind of guess, especially their antenna. If you're looking at something that has like a really feathery antenna or fluffy looking antenna, it's likely a moth. Butterflies are going to tend to have just stick-shaped antenna. But again, that's not going to be a good steadfast rule every time, just a good guideline.
Calais, this is Celeste. A quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
Butterflies are prey to what animals? Birds?
Yeah, typically birds. Anything that eats insects and could catch them, I'm sure would enjoy them. But since they are more flying and going to be found up high in trees, they're mostly going to be worried about birds. There are some that are poisonous and kind of toxic, like the monarch butterfly for sure. So there are ways that they avoid birds, but it's that kind of evolution back and forth. There are going to be birds that have evolved to not care about the poison, so they'll still eat them. But
Interesting.
yeah.
Well, thank you. You've been really helpful, and I've been writing down options for our gardens up here.
Nice.
So that's great. And
Great.
thank you so much for making time to do this for us. It was really...
If you do ever have any questions for us, I think there's some emails on our website. One of them might be education@butterflies.org. Feel free to send us an email if you have any questions. We'll find an answer to get back to you.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Of course. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too. All righty. Bye.
Bye.